Hello everyone! In this video I'd like to show you how I paint portraits in watercolor and share some tips. As we all know, watercolors can be very intimidating, especially when painting portraits. So hopefully that this video can help you and inspire you to practice, paint more, and definitely feel free to make it your own. But before we start, I'd like to just mention that this is by no means the only way to paint, or you have to paint this way. This is just how I like to paint portraits, and I think it's a little bit easier, but definitely play around with it, make it your own, and have fun. Alright, so let's go ahead and begin. When starting with a new medium, be it watercolor, acrylics, or oils, I always like to start with a monochromatic or one color studies. In this study, I'll be using Neutral Tint by Daniel Smith. Then you can go ahead and choose whichever color you want. It doesn't have to be Neutral Tint or by Daniel Smith, just whatever you have laying around. Now for brushes, I use synthetic brushes. I use the Vinci Cosmotop pin. I use rounds in a size 3 and a size 6. The size 3 has a very fine point for the fine details, and then the size 6 gets those large areas. If you have even a larger brush, like maybe around 8, that will help as well for those large areas for smoother blendings. Now I also have a very old beaten down number 1 brush. This one happens to be by Sceptre Gold 2 from Winsor, and it's so old, but I still keep it around for its slightly stiffer bristles that are used for scrubbing, and also it's more frayed, and also I don't mind damaging it when I am scrubbing the paper. I will have all of the supplies listed down in the description box. So what I'm doing here is I'm just demonstrating that with our first layer we'll begin with a lot of water and a little bit of paint. This method will be building up the layers slowly. With our first layer we'll begin with a lot of water and a little bit of paint to create these very light washes. In order to get darker, you will be using the opposite. You'll be using a lot of paint and a little bit of water. Now when layering, make sure that your first layer is completely dry before you go in with the second layer. And just gradually layer that. Don't go straight with your darkest dark. Begin with those light washes, blend them out, let it dry, and repeat. Around the eyes, I know that those are my darkest spots, so I go straight with a darker color, but I'm not going the ultimate darkest value. You want to leave that for the last layers. Remember that you can activate watercolor with a wet brush, so you want to be careful with not overblending, not having too much water, so your bottom layers will not lift. All you're doing is just gently glazing over your new color. If you are beginning, I highly recommend, or even if you're an experienced watercolor artist, it is much better to use a 100% cotton watercolor paper than a cheap wood pulp paper. The technique that I'm using, the overblending and scrubbing, is easier achieved on the cotton paper than is on the wood pulp. The wood pulp will just begin to tear up on you and lift and just become a hot mess. Now remember that watercolors dry lighter than how they appear wet. So if you think you have an area that's too dark, give some time to dry. You will find out it's actually going to turn out lighter. Now if you do have an area that's a little bit too dark, or you made a mistake, you could go in with a damp brush and just scrub it a little bit, and then use a soft paper towel to lift that up. So for example, you forgot to leave a highlight, you can just scrub it a little bit with a damp brush and lift it up with a paper towel. Now that's assuming that your pigments are not staining. You can find out information on a watercolor tube if your pigment is staining or not. If it is staining, it's just going to be a little bit tougher to lift it up. See, however, the lips, I didn't just go with the darkest dark. I went from a light shade into a medium, and then I came back with a darker one. It serves two purposes. One, if I make a mistake, it's no big deal. It's not the darkest dark. I know that I'll go in with a darker layer. And two, if you go straight away with your dark layer, it won't be deep enough. Here I'm starting to add a little bit more darkness in my dark areas. But I make sure that I don't go too dark too fast. I'm just slightly putting down an area and then I blend around it. My paper is fully dry. I'm not working wet into wet. I'm working wet into dry. If I do need a very soft blending, I will wet the area around that and then add my pigment and then smooth out the edges. Now here we use a white gouache, which is an opaque watercolor in titanium white. And I use it to add highlights that I normally won't be able to, such as for her eyes and her lips, her bottom lip. Keep in mind, once again, gouache is also revettable, so if you go in later on and you begin to blend out the area, you can have a hot mess as your pigment will start blending in with that white and start creating different tones. So yeah, here we have my real time. So you can see how slow the process really is. So you don't get frustrated if you don't finish a painting in 8 minutes. This actually took me, I think, about 3 hours. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you.